I decided to surprise my wife with dinner at her office after she sent me "I will be working late" text. And when I entered her office, I saw my wife and her boss kissing on her office desk. I left without a word, blocked all the cards, and changed the locks. But then something happened that no one expected. My name is Jaden Reed, and let me tell you something about good intentions. They're like GPS directions that lead you straight into a damn brick wall. You think you're being smart, taking the scenic route, only to end up somewhere you never wanted to be in the first place. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. It was a Tuesday night, which should have been my first red flag because nothing good ever happens on a Tuesday. Mondays suck so bad that you expect them to kick you in the teeth, but Tuesdays? They sneak up on you like a passive-aggressive roommate who eats your leftovers and leaves the empty container in the fridge just to mess with your head. I'd been slaving away in the kitchen for 2 hours, and I mean actually slaving. Not that half-hearted throw some frozen pizza in the oven nonsense that most guys my age call cooking. No, I went full Gordon Ramsay on this meal, minus the British accent and the creative use of profanity. Lemon herb salmon with this fancy marinade I'd found on some cooking blog that promised it would transport your taste buds to the Mediterranean. Garlic rice that smelled so good it could probably cure depression, and green beans that I'd actually trimmed by hand like some kind of domestic god. The whole kitchen smelled like a 5-star restaurant, and I was feeling pretty damn proud of myself. This was Cassidy's favorite meal, the same one I'd made for our second anniversary, back when she still pretended to appreciate the effort I put into these things. Back when she'd actually show up to eat it while it was still warm. My phone buzzed with her text, "Working late again. Don't wait up. Sorry, babe, red heart." Now, a smarter man might have taken that text at face value, wrapped up the salmon, and called it a night. But apparently, I'd left my common sense in my other pants, because instead of being reasonable, I had what I can only describe as a moment of pure, unadulterated stupidity disguised as romantic gesture. Why not surprise her at the office? I thought to myself, like some kind of romantic comedy protagonist who clearly hadn't read the script all the way through. She's been working so hard lately. She probably hasn't even eaten. I'll be the thoughtful husband who brings dinner to his overworked wife. God, I was such an idiot. I packed everything up in those fancy containers we'd gotten as wedding gifts. The ones we'd never actually used because we were always too busy or too tired or too whatever to eat meals that required actual dishes. The salmon went into the big glass container, the rice into the medium one, and the green beans into the small one, all arranged in a paper bag like I was running some kind of gourmet delivery service. The drive across town gave me plenty of time to rehearse my surprise entrance. I'd walk in with this amazing dinner. She'd look up from her computer with those tired eyes, and her whole face would light up. She'd probably tear up a little, the good kind of tears, not the "why are you like this" tears I'd been seeing more often lately. We'd eat together in her office. She'd tell me about whatever project was keeping her so busy, and for once in the past 6 months, we'd actually connect like we used to. Yeah, that's not how it went down. Her office building was one of those sleek glass towers that screams, "We make more money than you," from every reflective surface. I'd been there maybe 3 times in the 2 years she'd worked there, and each time I felt like I needed a permission slip just to breathe the air. The security guard knew me by now, nice guy named Frank who always asked about my carpentry work and actually listened to the answers. "Evening, Mr. Reed," Frank said as I signed in. "Mrs. Reed's still upstairs. Working late again, huh?" "You know how it is," I replied, holding up the bag. "Thought I'd bring her some dinner." Frank smiled. "She's lucky to have you. Elevator's to your right." The elevator ride up to the 14th floor felt longer than usual, probably because I was bouncing on my heels like a kid on Christmas morning. The numbers ticked by, 8, 9, 10, and I kept adjusting the bag, making sure everything was still warm, still perfect. 14. Ding. The hallway was mostly dark except for the emergency lighting and the soft glow coming from under a few office doors. Cassidy's office was at the end of the hall, corner office with her name on a fancy brass nameplate that had cost more than most people's monthly grocery budget. I could see lights spilling out from under her door, could hear voices, her voice and someone else's. Probably a conference call, I thought. She'd been having a lot of those lately. I didn't knock. Why would I? I was her husband bringing her favorite meal. I had every right to walk into my wife's office, especially when she was working late, and probably hadn't eaten anything since her morning coffee and whatever sad desk salad she'd grabbed for lunch. I turned the handle and pushed the door open with my shoulder, already smiling, already preparing my surprise voice. And that's when my entire world decided to pack up and move to a different zip code. There she was, my wife, Cassidy Reed, who wore my ring and shared my last name and had promised to love, honor, and cherish me until death do us part. She was on her desk. Not sitting at it, but actually on it, like it was furniture built for a completely different purpose. Her skirt was hiked up, her blouse was half unbuttoned, and her legs were wrapped around Martin Durrell, her boss. Martin freaking Durrell, the guy who looked like he'd stepped out of a men's cologne ad and probably spent more on hair products than I made in a month. His hands were on her waist, gripping her like she was something he owned, and her hands were tangled in his perfectly styled hair while their mouths were locked together in the kind of kiss that definitely wasn't discussing quarterly reports. The bag slipped from my fingers. I didn't hear it hit the floor, didn't hear the containers rattle, didn't hear anything except the sound of my own heart trying to hammer its way out of my chest. Time did that weird thing where it stretches and compresses all at once. I was standing there for an eternity and no time at all. Neither of them saw me. They were too busy being the worst kind of cliché, too caught up in their little office romance to notice that the guy who'd been paying half of her car payment and all of the mortgage had just walked in on their private meeting. I didn't speak. What was I supposed to say? "Excuse me, you're sitting on my wife?" Sorry to interrupt, but I brought dinner. "Hey honey, how was your day?" Instead, I did the only thing that made sense in that moment of complete senselessness. I turned around, walked out, and pulled the door shut behind me with the kind of quiet precision that comes from years of trying not to wake someone up when you come home late. The walk back to the elevator felt like swimming through concrete. My legs moved, but I couldn't feel them. The elevator arrived. The doors opened. I got in. Frank said something to me on the way out, but it sounded like he was talking through water. I got in my truck, started the engine, and drove home through the same streets I'd driven 20 minutes earlier, when I was still stupid enough to think that bringing your wife dinner was a romantic gesture instead of the setup for the worst punchline of your life. You know what they don't tell you about having your life implode? It's not dramatic like in the movies. There's no swelling orchestral music, no dramatic monologue, no slow-motion breakdown in the rain. Nope. It's just you, sitting in your truck in your own driveway, staring at a house that suddenly feels like someone else's property, wondering when exactly you became the punchline to a joke you didn't even know was being told. I sat there for God knows how long. Engine running, heat blasting, but feeling colder than a penguin's backside in Antarctica. The radio was off. Hell, everything was off. My brain had basically put up an out-of-order sign and called it a day. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums like it's trying to squeeze the thoughts right out of your skull. My hands were still gripping the steering, like it was the only thing keeping me from floating away into space. White knuckles, cramped fingers, the whole 9 yards. I kept replaying what I'd seen, like some kind of masochistic highlight reel. Cassidy on that desk. Martin's hands on her waist. The way she'd kissed him like she meant it, like she'd been thinking about it all day, like maybe she'd been thinking about it for months. How long had this been going on? That was the question that kept circling my brain like a vulture. Was this the first time? The 10th? Had they been planning this? Or was it some spur-of-the-moment thing that just happened to coincide with me deciding to play the devoted husband? And more importantly, how the hell had I been so blind? All those late nights. All those work emergencies. All those times she'd come home and gone straight to the shower, claiming she needed to wash off the stress of the day. Jesus Christ, I'd been living with a stranger for months and never even noticed. But here's the thing about rock bottom. Once you hit it, you've got two choices. You can lie there and let it crush you, or you can use it as a foundation to build something better. And sitting in that driveway, feeling sorry for myself wasn't going to change the fact that my wife was probably still wrapped around her boss like a cheap suit. So I did what any reasonable man would do in this situation. I went full nuclear. First stop, online banking. Thank God for smartphones and mobile apps, because I was about to become the most efficient scorned husband in the history of scorned husbands. Every joint account we had, checking, savings, that little emergency fund we'd been building for our someday vacation to Europe, I transferred it all into my personal account. The one she'd never had access to because, ironically, I'd wanted to keep some financial independence. Funny how that worked out. Then came the credit cards. Oh, Cassidy loved those credit cards. Loved them like they were personal shopping assistants paid to make her happy. Well, guess what? Shopping spree's over, sweetheart. Every card she had access to canceled faster than you could say adultery. The joint cards, the ones where I'd added her as an authorized user. Even that stupid store card she'd talked me into getting because it would save us money on home goods. All of them gone. My phone kept buzzing with confirmation texts and emails. Your card ending in 4782 has been successfully canceled. Account transfer of $47,332 has been completed. Each notification felt like a small victory, like I was finally doing something instead of just sitting there like a deer in headlights. But I wasn't done. Not even close. The house keys were next. Now, I'm a carpenter by trade, which means I know a thing or two about locks and security. I'd installed our deadbolts myself, picked out the hardware, the whole deal. And now I was going to change every single one of them. I had a spare set in my truck. Always keep backup hardware when you're in the trades. And within 30 minutes, every lock on our house had been rekeyed. Then came the digital stuff. Email accounts, Netflix passwords, Spotify, Amazon Prime, that meal delivery service she was always using. I changed every single password on every single account that had my name or my credit card attached to it. She'd been locked out of our digital life as thoroughly as she'd been locked out of our physical one. My phone started ringing. Cassidy. I watched it buzz on the dashboard, her contact photo, some selfie we'd taken last Christmas where we both looked happy and in love, lighting up the screen. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. And again. By the fourth call, I just turned the damn thing off. That's when I realized I couldn't stay here. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. This house, our house, suddenly felt like a crime scene. Every room held memories that had just been poisoned. Every piece of furniture was a reminder of a life that had apparently been a lie. I needed space to think, space to breathe, space to figure out what the hell came next. Tyson, my best friend since college, the guy who'd been my best man, the one person who'd always told me the truth even when I didn't want to hear it. If anyone would understand this situation, it'd be him. More importantly, if anyone would let me crash on their couch without asking 20 questions, it'd be him. I pulled out my phone and sent him a text. I'm coming over. Don't ask questions. His response came back in less than a minute. Doors open. Beer's cold. God, I love that guy. I went inside just long enough to pack a bag. Clothes for a few days, toiletries, my laptop, some work tools in case I needed the distraction. The house felt different now, like it belonged to someone else. Every photo on the walls, every little decorative touch Cassidy had added, it all looked fake now. Like props in a play I'd been performing in without realizing it. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter, right next to the coffee maker she used every morning, where she'd be sure to see it. No note, no explanation, just the ring sitting there like a period at the end of a sentence. Then I walked out of that house, threw my bag in the truck, and drove away without looking back. Not once. Because sometimes the best thing you can do is know when the show's over, even if you're the last one to realize you were never the star. You were just the guy paying for the theater. Tyson's place was exactly what you'd expect from a guy who'd been single for 3 years and had given up pretending he was going to settle down anytime soon. The apartment screamed functional bachelor pad, leather couch that had seen better days, a coffee table made from reclaimed wood that he'd probably built himself during one of his weekend warrior phases, and a kitchen that looked like it was used primarily for reheating pizza and storing beer. But you know what? It felt more like home than my actual home had in months. He opened the door before I even knocked, took one look at my face, and stepped aside without saying a word. That's real friendship right there. Knowing when someone needs space to breathe before they need advice, sympathy, or 20 questions about what went wrong. He just pointed toward the couch, disappeared into the kitchen, and came back with 2 ice-cold Budweisers. Rough night? He asked, settling into his recliner like we were just hanging out watching the game instead of me having a full-blown life crisis in his living room. You could say that. I took a long pull from the beer and felt some of the tension in my shoulders start to loosen. Found Cassidy playing tonsil hockey with her boss on her office desk. Tyson nearly choked on his beer. Jesus Christ, man. Are you serious? Dead serious. Walked in expecting to surprise her with dinner. Got surprised with dinner and a show instead. The sarcasm was coming easier now, like my brain was finally catching up to what had happened and defaulting to dark humor as a coping mechanism. He paused, clearly trying to find the right words. That's seriously messed up, dude. I'm sorry. Yeah, well, join the club. Population me. I leaned back into the couch cushions and closed my eyes. But here's the thing. I'm not just sitting around feeling sorry for myself. I already started taking care of business. That got his attention. Tyson sat forward, eyebrows raised. What kind of business? The kind that involves making sure she can't spend another dime of my money or get back into my house. I ran through everything I'd done. The bank accounts, the credit cards, the locks, the passwords. With each item on the list, I watched Tyson's expression shift from concern to something that looked suspiciously like pride. Damn, Jaden. You don't mess around when you're pissed off. I'm not pissed off, I said, and realized I actually meant it. I'm done. There's a difference. Pissed off implies I want to fight about it, want to argue, want to try to fix things. Done means I'm moving forward with or without her, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be without. That first night at Tyson's, I barely slept. Not because I was heartbroken. Well, not entirely, but because my brain was running calculations like some kind of divorce algorithm. What assets did we have? What debts? How long would this take? What was I going to need to protect myself legally? By morning, I made a decision. I needed a lawyer, and not just any lawyer. I needed someone who specialized in making sure cheating spouses didn't get to profit from their betrayal. Lucky for me, Tyson knew just the person. Camila Rivers, he said over coffee that actually tasted decent for once. She handled my sister's divorce 2 years ago. Complete shark in the courtroom, but fair. And she doesn't mess around with the emotional stuff. She focuses on results. Sounds perfect. Can you get me her number? 20 minutes later, I was dialing a family law office, expecting to leave a voicemail and wait 3 days for a callback like every other professional service in this city. Instead, Camila Rivers picked up on the first ring herself. Rivers Family Law? This is Camila. Ms. Rivers, my name is Jaden Reed. Tyson Maxwell referred me. I need to file for divorce, and I need to do it right. Adultery? She asked, cutting straight to the chase. Among other things, yeah. How long have you been married? 3 years. Any kids? No. Assets? House, joint savings, retirement accounts. Pretty standard stuff. When did you discover the affair? Last night. About 4 hours ago. There was a pause, and I could hear her typing. And what have you done since then? I told her everything. The financial moves, the locks, the passwords, the whole systematic dismantling of our shared life. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Mr. Reed, in 20 years of family law, I can count on one hand the number of clients who've shown this level of strategic thinking in the first 24 hours. Most people spend weeks crying into their coffee and making emotional decisions that hurt their case later. I'm not most people. No, you're not. And that's going to work in your favor. Can you be here at 2 o'clock today? I'll be there. Good. Bring everything. Bank statements, credit card records, mortgage documents, any evidence of the affair. We're going to make sure this divorce is clean, quick, and heavily weighted in your favor. What about her? Won't she fight back? Camila's laugh was sharp and confident. Mr. Reed, emotion doesn't win cases. Paper does. Documentation, evidence, financial records, that's what matters in a courtroom. And from what you've told me, you've got plenty of paper and she's got plenty of explaining to do. One more thing, I said. I want this handled quietly. No drama, no public scenes. I just want out. Understood. We'll serve her professionally and proceed by the book. But make no mistake, quiet doesn't mean weak. We're going to protect you. I was making decisions instead of just reacting to Cassidy's choices. I wasn't waiting around for her to come home and explain, wasn't hoping we could work things out, wasn't even particularly interested in hearing her side of the story. Tyson came back from his morning run and found me sitting on his couch with my laptop, already working on organizing financial documents. How you feeling, man? Honestly, better than I have in a long time. I looked up from the screen. I think I've been waiting for an excuse to get out of that marriage for months. I just didn't want to admit it. Sometimes it takes getting hit by a truck to realize you were standing in the middle of the road, he said. Yeah, well, this truck just did me a favor. Now I know exactly where I stand, and more importantly, I know exactly what I need to do about it. And for the first time since this whole mess started, I actually meant it. You know what's funny about betrayal? Just when you think you've hit rock bottom, life hands you a shovel and says, "Keep digging, champ. There's more down there." I'd been staying at Tyson's for exactly 1 week, and I was finally starting to feel like I had some control over this situation. The lawyer was handling the paperwork. I'd successfully avoided all of Cassidy's increasingly desperate phone calls, and I was even sleeping through the night without waking up in a cold sweat. That's when my phone buzzed with a message from someone I barely knew. Marley Shaw. I had to think for a minute before I could even place the name. She worked with Cassidy, some kind of marketing coordinator or project manager, I think. We'd met exactly once, at the company Christmas party last year. She seemed nice enough, kind of quiet, the type who probably saw everything but didn't say much about what she observed. Not exactly someone I'd expect to hear from during my personal apocalypse. The message was short and to the point. "You deserve to see this." Attached was a screenshot that made my blood run colder than a polar bear's lunchbox. It was a text conversation between Cassidy and Martin, and the timestamp showed it was from 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. While I was cooking her favorite dinners and asking about her day, and generally being the world's most oblivious husband, she was having text conversations that read like a masterclass in calculated manipulation. "Martin, when are you going to tell him?" "Cassidy, not yet. The mortgage is almost paid off. Another 6 months, maybe 8. "Martin, I hate this sneaking around." "Cassidy, just be patient. Let Jaden pay off the house, then I'll file. Half of everything becomes mine anyway." "Martin, what if he finds out?" "Cassidy, he won't. He's too trusting. Too busy trying to be the perfect husband to notice what's happening right under his nose." "Martin, and after?" "Cassidy, after, we can stop pretending. I'll have the house equity, half the savings, and alimony if I play it right. Then we can do whatever we want." I read it 3 times before my brain fully processed what I was looking at. This wasn't some spontaneous affair that had gotten out of hand. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a mistake or any of the other excuses people use when they get caught cheating. This was a plan. A calculated, cold-blooded, long-term plan to use me as a personal ATM while she built a new life with her boss. My hands were shaking so hard, I almost dropped the phone. The betrayal I'd discovered a week ago suddenly felt like amateur hour compared to this. She hadn't just cheated on me. She'd been actively planning to financially ruin me while I paid for the privilege. Just let Jaden pay off the mortgage. Like I was some kind of useful idiot whose only purpose was to clear the debt so she could cash out. Too trusting. Too busy trying to be the perfect husband. Jesus Christ. She'd been laughing at me for months while I cooked her dinner and asked about her day and worried about why she seemed so distant lately. I forwarded the screenshot to Camila Rivers before I even finished reading it the 3rd time. Her response came back faster than a NASCAR pit crew. "This changes everything. Can you meet me in an hour?" Tyson took one look at my face when I showed him the screenshot and just shook his head. "Man, I thought she was just cheating. This is next-level evil." "Yeah, well, apparently I've been married to a sociopath for 3 years and never noticed." I was pacing around his living room like a caged animal, my brain trying to process the full scope of what I'd just learned. "How long do you think this has been going on?" "The planning, I mean. Based on this conversation? Months. Maybe longer." Tyson was reading over the messages again, his expression getting darker with each line. "Dude, she was never planning to stay married to you. This whole thing was just a business transaction to her." That hit me like a punch to the gut, but it also explained so much. The distance I'd been feeling. The way she'd seemed more interested in her phone than in conversation. The way she'd stopped talking about future plans or vacation ideas or anything that extended beyond the next few months. She hadn't been having marital problems. She'd been executing an exit strategy. At Camila's office, I felt like I was walking into mission control for the most important operation of my life. She had the screenshot printed out and spread across her desk alongside all the other documents we'd been gathering. "Mr. Reed, this is what we call a smoking gun," she said, tapping the printout with her pen. "Intent to defraud, premeditated financial manipulation, evidence of a conspiracy to commit adultery for financial gain. This doesn't just help your case, this decimates hers." What does this mean, practically speaking? It means we're not just filing for divorce anymore. We're going after her for fraud. She used deception to maintain access to marital assets while planning to leave the marriage. That's textbook financial abuse. Camila's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. In simple terms, she's not getting half of anything. If we play this right, she might be lucky to walk away with her car and her clothes. And the house. The house she was planning to steal half of after you paid it off? She'll be lucky if she doesn't have to pay you damages. Camila leaned back in her chair, looking like a lawyer who'd just been handed a case she couldn't lose. This screenshot proves intent, Mr. Reed. She wasn't just cheating, she was running a long-term con game, and you were the mark. I sat there staring at the evidence of my wife's calculated betrayal, and you know what the weirdest part was? I wasn't even hurt anymore. I was just angry. Not the hot, explosive kind of angry that makes you do stupid things, but the cold, focused kind that makes you dangerous. So what's our next move? We document everything. Every conversation, every financial transaction, every piece of evidence that shows this was premeditated. And then we serve her with papers that will make her realize she picked the wrong guy to scam. How long will this take? With evidence like this? Not long. And Mr. Reed, Camila looked up from her notes with something that might have been respect. I've been doing this for 20 years. I've seen a lot of cheating spouses, but I've never seen someone document their own fraud this thoroughly. She basically wrote our case for us. As I walked out of that office, I realized something had fundamentally changed. I wasn't the betrayed husband anymore, trying to figure out where his marriage went wrong. I was a guy who discovered that his business partner had been embezzling from their joint account, and now it was time to call in the auditors. Cassidy thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. Turns out, I wasn't even playing her game anymore. I was playing an entirely different sport, and I had home field advantage. If you've never sat in a lawyer's conference room while someone methodically destroys your entire marriage with color-coded file folders and legal tabs, let me tell you, it's like watching a really expensive autopsy. Except instead of figuring out what killed the body, you're figuring out exactly how much you're lying. Cheating wife thought your trust was worth in cold, hard cash. Camila's office had this big mahogany conference table that probably cost more than my truck, and she turned it into what looked like the war room for Operation Screw over Cassidy. I'm talking full-scale military planning here, complete with documents sorted by date, relevance, and what she called evidentiary value, which was apparently lawyer speak for how badly this will hurt her in court. Mr. Reed, what we're building here isn't just a divorce case, Camila said, spreading out bank statements like she was dealing cards in the world's most expensive poker game. We're building a fraud case with a divorce attached. There's a difference, and that difference is going to save you a lot of money. She wasn't kidding about the organization. Every receipt I'd brought in, every bank statement, every credit card transaction, it was all there, sorted into neat little piles that told the story of my marriage in a way that was both completely accurate and absolutely devastating. Financial manipulation, she said, tapping the first stack. These were copies of all the joint account statements showing how Cassidy had been steadily increasing her spending over the past 8 months, while I'd been focused on paying down the mortgage. Dinners with clients that I now realized were probably dates with Martin. Shopping trips that she'd explained as work clothes, but were clearly way beyond anything she needed for her job. Weekend girls' trips that suddenly made a lot more sense in the context of that screenshot. Premeditated fraud, she continued, moving to the second pile. This was the gold mine. Copies of all the text messages Marley had sent me, printed out and highlighted like evidence in a murder trial. Which, in a way, I guess it was. The murder of my marriage, with Cassidy holding the smoking gun and a detailed confession. Intent to deceive, she said, indicating the third stack. This was documentation of all the lies. The late nights at work that I'd now confirmed with Marley were actually dinner dates. The work conferences that didn't exist, the overtime payments that had never shown up in our joint account because she'd been depositing them into a personal account I didn't even know existed. But the fourth pile was my personal favorite, intent to commit theft. This was where Camila had calculated exactly how much money Cassidy had been planning to steal from me through her little pay off the mortgage then divorce him scheme. Turns out, if her plan had worked, she would have walked away with roughly $180,000 in house equity, plus half of our savings, plus potential alimony. All while I got to keep the debt and the betrayal. She essentially treated your marriage like a business investment, Camila explained, pulling out a calculator that probably had more computing power than the space shuttle. She put in 3 years of fake affection and got access to your income, your credit, and your assets. Then she planned to cash out at maximum value while leaving you with minimum return. Jesus Christ, I muttered, staring at the numbers. I've been married to a con artist. A particularly stupid con artist, Camila corrected. Smart criminals don't document their crimes in text messages. But lucky for us, your wife apparently thought she was smarter than everyone else in the room. That's when she pulled out what she called the nuclear option, a thick folder labeled counterclaims and asset recovery. This wasn't just about preventing Cassidy from stealing from me. This was about making her pay for what she'd already taken. We're going after her for fraudulent conversion, Camila explained, flipping through pages that might as well have been written in ancient Greek for all I understood them. Every dollar she spent on her affair, every lie she told to access marital funds, every deceptive action she took, we're treating it as theft and demanding restitution. Can we actually do that? Mr. Reed, she stole from you. She just did it with your own credit cards instead of breaking into your house. Theft is theft, whether it's committed by a stranger or a spouse. Her smile was the kind of expression that probably made opposing lawyers wake up in cold sweats. Plus, we have something most fraud cases don't have, a written confession of intent. She was right. That screenshot wasn't just evidence of an affair. It was Cassidy literally admitting that she was using me to pay off the house so she could steal half of it. In legal terms, that was apparently like robbing a bank and then mailing the police a detailed plan of how you were going to rob the bank. So what happens next? Next, we file. Not just for divorce, but for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We're asking for full ownership of the house, reimbursement for all marital funds she misappropriated, and punitive damages for the fraudulent scheme. And if she fights it? Camila held up the screenshot. With this, she can't fight it. The best she can hope for is that we don't pursue criminal charges for fraud. That stopped me cold. Criminal charges? What she did isn't just grounds for divorce, Mr. Reed. It's potentially criminal fraud. She used false pretenses to obtain and misuse marital assets with the intent to permanently deprive you of your property. That's textbook theft by deception. She paused, studying my expression. Now, we probably won't pursue criminal charges unless she forces our hand. But the possibility gives us significant leverage in negotiations. I sat back in my chair, trying to process the scope of what we were doing. A week ago, I thought I was just a guy whose wife was cheating on him. Now I was apparently the victim of an elaborate financial crime that could send my wife to prison if we decided to push it that far. There's one more thing, Camila said, pulling out a final document. We need to discuss your emotional state. Courts take intentional infliction of emotional distress seriously, especially when it's this calculated. The fact that she planned this betrayal for months, used your trust against you, and documented her intent to defraud you, that's not just adultery, that's psychological torture. I'm not looking for sympathy money, I said. This isn't sympathy money. This is holding her accountable for the full scope of what she did to you. She didn't just cheat, Mr. Reed. She systematically destroyed your ability to trust, your financial security, and your emotional well-being as part of a calculated plan to steal from you. That has value, and she needs to pay for it. Looking at that conference table covered with the evidence of my wife's betrayal, organized into neat little piles that told the story of how thoroughly I'd been played, I realized something important. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the plaintiff, and apparently, I had one hell of a case. You know what's hilarious about people who get caught red-handed? They always think the problem isn't what they did. It's that they got caught doing it. Like somehow, if they can just explain themselves well enough, reality will magically rearrange itself to make their betrayal seem reasonable. Cassidy apparently got the memo that I'd gone full nuclear on our marriage, because my phone started buzzing like a hornet's nest about 2 days after Camila filed the papers. And I mean buzzing constantly. Texts, calls, voicemails, even a couple emails to accounts I'd forgotten she had access to. It was like watching someone try to put out a house fire with a squirt gun. Desperate, pathetic, and absolutely doomed to fail. The first wave was pure panic mode. Jaden, please call me. We need to talk. I can explain everything. This isn't what you think. Please don't do this to us. Classic Cheater Playbook, Chapter 1. Deny, deflect, and hope your victim is stupid enough to believe that what they saw with their own eyes was somehow a misunderstanding. I didn't respond. Camila had been crystal clear about that. Silence is your strongest weapon, she'd said. Every word you say to her can potentially be used against you. Every word she says to you can potentially be used against her. Let her panic. Let her make mistakes. Let her dig her own grave with increasingly desperate messages. And boy, did she ever dig. By day 3, the messages shifted from panic to bargaining. I know you're hurt, but we can work through this. What we had was real, Jaden. Don't throw it all away over one mistake. I'll quit my job. I'll do whatever it takes. One mistake. Like 3 months of planning to defraud me was just an oopsie, like accidentally putting salt in the coffee instead of sugar. But here's where it got really interesting. Martin started texting me too. Because apparently, when your affair partner's husband discovers your little scheme and lawyers up, the natural response is to reach out personally and try to smooth things over like you're all adults who can work this out over a beer. Jaden, I want you to know that what happened between Cassidy and me wasn't planned. It just happened. Right. It just happened. For months. With detailed text conversations about timing and financial strategy. Completely spontaneous, I'm sure. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. Yes, the classic, I'm sorry you're upset that I deliberately hurt you non-apology. This guy was really hitting all the greatest hits of corporate damage control. I think we should meet and talk this through like men. Like men. As if there was some kind of masculine honor in sitting down with the guy who'd been banging your wife while she plotted to steal your house. As if this was some kind of gentleman's disagreement that could be resolved with a firm handshake and a mutual understanding. The best part? He actually suggested we meet at a coffee shop to clear the air. Yeah, let me just pencil in a nice chat with my wife's affair partner right between my therapy session and my meeting with the fraud investigator. I'm sure that'll go great. I showed all the messages to Tyson, who read them with the kind of expression you'd have while watching someone step on rakes in their own backyard. Dude, they have no idea how screwed they are, do they? Not a clue, I said. They think this is relationship drama. They don't realize it's a criminal investigation waiting to happen. By the end of the first week, the messages had shifted again. This time to anger, which was actually refreshing because at least it was honest. You're being vindictive. This is excessive. You're destroying my career over a mistake. I never thought you were this cruel. Cruel. That was rich, coming from someone who'd spent months planning to financially ruin me while I cooked her dinner and asked about her day. But that's the thing about people who think they're smarter than everyone else. They genuinely believe that getting caught is unfair, like they deserve to get away with it because they'd put so much effort into the planning. The voicemails were even better. Cassidy crying, begging, explaining that she'd just been confused and scared about our future. Martin leaving these weird formal messages that sounded like he was reading from a script his own lawyer had probably written. I want to clarify that any relationship intent to harm my marriage. Like marriage is some kind of third party that can be injured independently of the people in it. Like he'd accidentally rear-ended my marriage in a parking lot instead of deliberately planning to steal half my assets while screwing my wife on her office desk. But the messages that really got to me were the ones where Cassidy tried to rewrite history. You know, our marriage hasn't been good for months. We've been growing apart anyway. I was going to talk to you about counseling. Suddenly, our entire relationship was retroactively terrible, and her affair was somehow a reasonable response to problems I didn't even know we had. That's when I realized something important. She actually believed this stuff. She'd rewritten our entire marriage in her head to justify what she'd done, and now she was genuinely confused about why I wasn't going along with her revised version of events. In her mind, she wasn't a scheming adulteress who'd planned to defraud me. She was a woman trapped in an unhappy marriage who'd found solace in the arms of another man. The cognitive dissonance was actually impressive. She'd managed to convince herself that planning to steal half my house after I paid it off was somehow morally superior to just asking for a divorce up front. Like the elaborate deception was actually a kindness, sparing me the pain of knowing she wanted out until after I'd served my purpose as her personal mortgage payment service. Tyson found me one evening, sitting on his couch with my phone turned off, just staring at the wall. "You okay, man?" "Yeah," I said, and I actually meant it. "I'm just amazed at how thoroughly I didn't know the person I was married to." "That's not on you, dude. Sociopaths are good at hiding what they are." The weird part is, I'm not even angry anymore. I'm just done. Like, completely done. She could send me 1,000 more messages, and it wouldn't change anything. She could show up here with tears and apologies and promises to change, and it still wouldn't matter. Because you finally see her for what she really is? Because I finally see me for what I really am, I said. And what I am is someone who deserves better than spending his life with someone who thinks love is a long-term investment strategy. My phone stayed off for the rest of the night. And for the first time since this whole mess started, the silence felt like peace instead of emptiness. There's something deeply satisfying about watching karma show up to work right on time, wearing a crisp uniform and carrying official paperwork. I'm talking about the kind of cosmic justice that makes you believe the universe has a sense of humor and occasionally enjoys a good revenge plot. Camila had called me 2 days earlier with news that made my week. The papers are ready, and I've arranged for service. Where would you like this to happen? Now, most people would probably choose the safe, private option. Have the papers delivered to her house, maybe her car, somewhere discreet where she could process the shock without an audience. But here's the thing about being systematically betrayed by someone you trusted. It changes your perspective on what constitutes appropriate public behavior. Her office, I said without hesitation. During business hours. Make sure it's when people are around. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mr. Reed, are you sure? That's going to be public. Camila, she screwed her boss on her office desk while I was home cooking her dinner. Public ship has already sailed. I'm just making sure it docks at the right port. I like your style. I'll arrange for service at 2 p.m. on Friday. Peak workplace visibility. The beauty of it was poetic justice at its finest. She'd chosen that office as the scene of her betrayal, so it seemed only fitting that it should also be the scene of her consequences. Plus, there was a certain symmetry to the whole thing. I'd walked into that building as the oblivious husband bringing dinner, and now I was going back as the plaintiff serving divorce papers for fraud. I didn't have to be there for the actual service, but wild horses couldn't have kept me away. I wanted to see her face when she realized that her carefully planned exit strategy had just become her entrance to legal hell. Call it petty, call it vindictive, call it whatever you want. I called it closure. I parked across the street from her office building at 1:45 p.m. and waited. The process server was a professional named Dave who looked like he'd been delivering bad news for 20 years and had perfected the art of staying calm while other people's worlds exploded. He'd called to confirm the timing and location, and his instructions were simple. Find Cassidy Reed in her office on the 14th floor and hand her a manila envelope that would officially end her marriage and potentially start criminal proceedings against her. At exactly 2 p.m., I watched Dave walk through the glass doors of the building where my wife had planned my financial destruction. He was carrying a leather briefcase and wearing the kind of confident expression that said he'd done this 1,000 times before and knew exactly how it was going to play out. I waited in my truck, watching the building like it was about to explode. Which, in a way, it was. Somewhere up on the 14th floor, Cassidy was about to discover that actions have consequences, that planning to defraud your husband isn't as foolproof as it seems, and that screenshots of text messages have a funny way of ruining your day. 20 minutes later, Dave walked back out of the building. He spotted my truck across the street and gave me a subtle thumbs up before getting in his car and driving away. Mission accomplished. The papers had been served, and somewhere upstairs, my wife was probably reading through legal documents that explained exactly how screwed she really was. But I wasn't done yet. I wanted to see her reaction for myself. I got out of my truck and walked across the street, through the same glass doors I'd walked through 2 weeks earlier with a bag of lemon herb salmon and the naive belief that I was married to someone who actually loved me. Frank, the security guard, recognized me immediately. "Hey, Mr. Reed. Haven't seen you in a while. Here to see Mrs. Reed." "Something like that," I said, signing in on the visitor log. "Is she upstairs?" "Far as I know. Seemed a little rattled when I saw her a few minutes ago, though. Everything okay?" "Everything's perfect, Frank. Just perfect." The elevator ride to the 14th floor felt different this time. 2 weeks ago, I'd been nervous with anticipation, excited to surprise my wife with her favorite meal. Now I was calm with certainty, satisfied to witness the consequences of her choices. The nervous energy was gone, replaced by something that felt suspiciously like peace. The hallway was busier than it had been that night. People walking between offices, carrying files, having conversations about quarterly projections and marketing strategies. Normal office stuff, which made what I was about to see even more satisfying. I could hear her before I could see her. Cassidy's voice, higher than usual, stressed and shaky, coming from her corner office. The door was open, and there were people gathered around. Co-workers who'd probably heard about the process server and were trying to figure out what kind of legal drama had just invaded their workplace. I positioned myself where I could see into her office without being obvious about it. And there she was, sitting at her desk. The same desk where she'd been kissing Martin 2 weeks earlier, holding a manila envelope and looking like someone had just told her that the apocalypse had been scheduled for next Tuesday. Her face was pale, her hands were shaking, and she kept reading through the papers like she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. Which made sense, because what she was seeing was a lawsuit that demanded not just a divorce, but financial restitution for fraud, punitive damages for intentional infliction of emotional distress, and a detailed accounting of every dollar she'd spent on her affair. Martin was there too, standing behind her desk with the kind of expression that suggested he was finally beginning to understand that sleeping with a married woman wasn't just morally questionable, it was potentially legally expensive. He kept looking over her shoulder at the papers, and I could practically see the moment when he realized that his name was mentioned in several of the legal documents as a co-conspirator in the fraud scheme. "What does this mean?" I heard him ask, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "It means we're fucked, Martin," Cassidy replied, her voice breaking slightly. "It means he knows everything." And that's when she looked up from the papers and saw me standing in the hallway, watching her world collapse in real time. Our eyes met across the busy office space, and for a moment, everything else faded away. It was just her and me, the woman who'd planned to destroy my life and the man who'd beaten her to the punch. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I just stood there for a few seconds, let her see that I was calm and controlled and completely unbroken by what she'd done to me. Then I smiled. Not a cruel smile, not an angry smile, just the satisfied smile of someone who'd finally gotten the justice he deserved. Then I turned around, walked back to the elevator, and left her to explain to her coworkers why a process server had just delivered legal papers that accused her of running a months-long fraud scheme against her own husband. I left her to figure out how to tell Martin that their affair wasn't just career suicide, it was potentially criminal conspiracy. I left her to deal with the consequences of thinking she was smarter than the guy who'd been cooking her dinner while she planned to steal his house. And I walked out of that building for the second time, but this time, I was walking toward my future instead of away from my past. You know what's weird about selling a house? It's not just the financial transaction or the paperwork, or even the stress of finding buyers who won't lowball you into bankruptcy. It's the moment when you realize that what you thought was your home was actually just a building where you happened to store your stuff and your delusions about having a happy marriage. I'd made the decision 3 days after serving Cassidy the papers. I was sitting in Tyson's living room, scrolling through real estate listings on my laptop, when it hit me like a ton of bricks wrapped in an eviction notice. I couldn't go back to that house. Not ever. Every room was contaminated with memories that had been retroactively poisoned by the truth about who I'd been married to. The kitchen where I'd cooked all those dinners while she texted her lover about exit strategies. The bedroom where we'd slept side by side while she planned to rob me blind. The living room where we'd watched Netflix and made small talk while she calculated how much my trust was worth in dollars and cents. The whole place was like a crime scene where the crime was my own stupidity. But here's the beautiful thing about hitting rock bottom. Once you're down there, you get to decide what you want to build on the wreckage. And what I wanted to build was a life that didn't include a single reminder of the 3 years I'd spent being played by someone who thought love was a business transaction. So I called a realtor. Not just any realtor, but Karen Martinez, the same woman who'd helped us buy the place 3 years earlier when we were young and stupid and thought we'd found our forever home. She remembered me, remembered us, and when I explained the situation, she didn't even try to talk me out of it. "Jaden, honey, I've been doing this for 15 years, she said over the phone. "I've seen plenty of divorce sales, and I can tell you right now that keeping a house just because you put money into it is like keeping a shirt just because it's expensive, even though it doesn't fit anymore and makes you look terrible. So you think I'm making the right call?" "I think you're making the only call that makes sense. How soon do you want to list it?" "Yesterday. I'll be there tomorrow morning with the paperwork." The next few days were a blur of staging and photography and open houses that felt like watching strangers audition to live in the museum of my failed marriage. Potential buyers walked through the rooms where my life had fallen apart, commenting on the hardwood floors I'd refinished myself and the kitchen backsplash Cassidy had picked out during one of our weekend trips to Home Depot. "This is a lovely space," one woman said, standing in the kitchen where I'd cooked that final dinner. "Very romantic." "Yeah," I said. "It's got character." What I didn't say was that the character was naive husband gets systematically destroyed by sociopathic wife, but that probably wasn't going to help with the sale. The house sold in 6 days. 6 days. Apparently, the market for 3-bedroom colonials with updated kitchens and recent Heartbreak was pretty strong. The buyers were a young couple who reminded me of Cassidy and me 3 years earlier, full of plans and optimism, and completely convinced that they'd found their happily ever after. I almost felt sorry for them, not because the house was cursed or anything, but because they had that same look Cassidy and I had probably had when we'd first walked through these rooms. That this is where we'll build our life together, expression that's equal parts hope and delusion. But hey, maybe they'd actually make it work. Maybe they'd actually love each other instead of using each other. Maybe their marriage would last longer than it took to pay off the mortgage. The closing was scheduled for 2 weeks later, which gave me plenty of time to pack up everything I wanted to keep and figure out what to do with everything I didn't. It's amazing how much stuff you accumulate when you think you're building a permanent life with someone. Wedding presents we'd never used, furniture we'd bought for rooms we'd planned to redecorate, pictures of trips we'd taken back when I thought her smiles were genuine. I kept the tools, obviously. My workshop equipment, my truck, my clothes, and exactly 3 pieces of furniture. The leather chair my dad had given me when I graduated college, the coffee table I'd built myself, and the bed from the guest room, because there was no way in hell I was keeping the mattress where my wife had probably been fantasizing about her boss while I slept next to her. Everything else went to charity, got sold online, or found its way to the curb with a free sign. The dining room set we'd saved up for, the living room furniture we'd picked out together, the decorative crap that had turned our house into what she'd called a home. All of it had to go. Not because I was being vindictive, but because keeping any of it felt like preserving evidence of a crime. The hardest part was the photos. We'd had pictures everywhere, wedding photos, vacation shots, candid moments from before I knew I was living with a con artist. I spent an entire afternoon going through them, and it was like watching a documentary about someone else's life. There we were at the beach in Florida, looking happy and in love. There we were at my sister's wedding, dancing like we meant it. There we were on Christmas morning, exchanging gifts and acting like we had a future together. I kept exactly 1 photo, not because I missed her or missed what we'd had, but because I needed to remember what lies looked like when they were smiling at you. I needed a reminder that people can fake anything if the payoff is big enough. The rest went in the trash. Every single one. 3 years of documented deception, straight into the garbage where they belonged. 2 weeks later, I sat in the lawyer's office, not Camila's office, a different one that handled real estate, and signed papers that officially transferred ownership of my former home to people who still believed in happy endings. The check I walked out with was substantial enough to give me options, which was more than I'd had when this whole nightmare started. That evening, I stood in the driveway of what was no longer my house, holding the keys I'd just handed over to the new owners. The place looked the same from the outside. Same mailbox, same front door, same windows that had witnessed the slow-motion destruction of my marriage. But it felt different. It felt like someone else's problem. I got in my truck and drove away without looking back. Not because I was too hurt to look, but because there was literally nothing behind me worth seeing. The house where I'd been lied to, cheated on, and financially manipulated was someone else's fresh start now. And for the first time in months, that felt exactly right. You know what's funny about starting over? You spend so much time planning your dramatic exit from your old life that you forget to plan your equally dramatic entrance into your new one. So there I was, officially divorced, financially intact thanks to Camila's legal wizardry, and completely homeless by choice, standing in the middle of downtown looking for an apartment like some kind of middle-aged college kid. The loft I found wasn't what you'd call luxury living, but it had 3 things going for it. Exposed brick walls that reminded me why I liked working with my hands, huge windows that let in enough light to make the place feel optimistic instead of depressing, and rent that wouldn't require me to eat ramen noodles for the next 5 years. Oh, and it was directly above a coffee shop called Grind Coffee, which sounded like either a great convenience or a guaranteed way to develop a caffeine addiction that would make my divorce settlement look like pocket change. The building was one of those converted warehouses that developers love to market as urban loft living to people who want to feel artistic without actually having to be artists. The kind of place where you pay extra for the privilege of hearing your upstairs neighbor's every footstep and pretending that exposed ductwork is a design feature instead of a cost-cutting measure. But it was mine. No shared mortgage, no joint lease, no our place that came with emotional baggage and bitter memories. Just my name on the lease, my deposit, my choice. After 3 years of everything being ours, the concept of mine felt revolutionary. I'd been living there for exactly 2 weeks when I first met Sierra Thorne, and let me tell you, meeting someone new when you're fresh out of a marriage that ended with fraud charges is like trying to date with a giant neon sign over your head that says, "Recently betrayed. Handle with care." I was coming down the stairs with a bag of garbage, because apparently, one of the joys of loft living is carrying your trash down 3 flights of stairs to reach the dumpster, when I nearly collided with a woman carrying what looked like 50 pounds of coffee beans. "Whoa, sorry," I said, stepping aside to let her pass. "Didn't see you there." "No worries," she replied, shifting the bag to get a better grip. "These stairs are a death trap when you're carrying anything heavier than a paperclip." That's when I actually looked at her instead of just noticing her as an obstacle between me and the dumpster. Sierra was probably in her early 30s, with the kind of practical beauty that didn't need makeup to be noticeable. She had shoulder-length brown hair that looked like she'd, and the kind of easy smile that made you want to smile back without thinking about it. "You must be the new tenant," she said, setting the coffee bag down for a moment. "I'm Sierra. I run the cafe downstairs." "Jaden," I said, extending my hand. "And yeah, just moved in a couple weeks ago. Sorry about the noise. I'm still figuring out which floorboards creak. Trust me, after 2 years of running a coffee shop, I sleep through everything, including the espresso machine directly below my apartment." She paused, tilting her head slightly. "Wait, are you the guy who's been ordering black coffee every morning at exactly 7:15? Guilty as charged. Is that a problem?" "Not at all. I was just impressed by the consistency. Most people's coffee habits are chaos, but you're like clockwork." She picked up the coffee bag again. "Although I have to ask, black coffee? No cream, no sugar, no fancy flavoring. I like things simple these days." Something in my tone must have suggested that there was a story behind that statement, because she gave me a look that was part curiosity and part understanding. Fair enough. Simple's underrated. That should have been the end of the conversation. Polite neighbor small talk, exchange of names, everyone goes about their business. But Sierra didn't seem to be in a hurry to end the interaction, and honestly, neither was I. It had been weeks since I'd had a conversation with someone who didn't know about my recent divorce, didn't want to discuss legal strategy, and wasn't trying to fix my life with unsolicited advice. "So what do you do?" she asked. "Besides drink black coffee with military precision." "I'm a carpenter. Mostly custom cabinets, built-ins, that sort of thing." "You, coffee shop owner, obviously. But I also do some freelance graphic design when the cafe's slow. Keeps the creative side of my brain from atrophying." She gestured toward the building. "This place used to be a textile factory back in the day. I bought the ground floor 2 years ago and converted it into the cafe. The owner let me have first dibs on the apartments upstairs when they finished the renovations." "So you've been here since the beginning?" "Pretty much. Watched this whole neighborhood transform from industrial wasteland to hipster paradise." She paused, studying my face with the kind of direct attention that suggested she was good at reading people. "What about you? What brought you to downtown loft living?" And that's where things got complicated, because the honest answer was my wife was cheating on me while planning to steal half my assets. So I divorced her, sold our house, and decided to start over somewhere that doesn't remind me of being systematically betrayed by someone I trusted. But you can't just dump that kind of information on someone you've known for 5 minutes, especially someone who seems genuinely nice and probably doesn't deserve to have her day ruined by strangers' relationship trauma. "Life changes," I said, which was the truth without being the whole truth. Sometimes you need a fresh start. Sierra nodded like that made perfect sense. I get that. I moved here after my last relationship ended. Sometimes geography is the best therapy. There was something in the way she said it that suggested she understood more than she was letting on. Not the kind of understanding that comes from curiosity or sympathy, but the kind that comes from experience. Like maybe she'd had her own reasons for needing a fresh start. Well, she said, picking up the coffee bag again. If you ever get tired of black coffee, come down and try something with more personality. I make a mean maple bourbon latte that might change your mind about simple being better. I'll think about it, I said, and realized I actually meant it. Good. And Jaden? She was halfway down the stairs, but turned back to look at me. Welcome to the neighborhood. I think you're going to like it here. As I watched her disappear around the corner, carrying 50 pounds of coffee beans like they weighed nothing, I realized something unexpected. For the first time in months, I was looking forward to tomorrow morning's coffee run. You know what's really twisted about the human brain? Just when you think you've successfully moved on from someone who systematically betrayed you, just when you've built a new life and found someone who treats you like a human being instead of a walking ATM, the past shows up at your door like an unwanted pizza delivery that you never ordered and definitely don't want to pay for. It was a Tuesday morning, because apparently, all the significant moments in my life were destined to happen on Tuesdays. And I was getting ready to head downstairs for my daily coffee ritual with Sierra. We'd been doing this dance for about 3 months now, this careful progression from neighbor small talk to actual friendship to something that felt suspiciously like the beginning of something real. She'd started saving me a maple bourbon latte every morning, even though I'd never actually ordered one. I'd started showing up 15 minutes early just to help her move the heavier supplies around. We'd progressed from standing at the counter to sitting at the corner table, from talking about the weather to talking about everything else. And somewhere along the way, I'd stopped thinking about Cassidy every time someone mentioned trust or marriage or the future. Then the doorbell rang. I opened the door expecting to see a delivery driver or maybe Tyson dropping by unannounced, but instead I found a cardboard box sitting on my doormat like some kind of emotional landmine. No delivery truck in sight, no signature required, just a medium-sized box with my name written on it in handwriting I recognized like a scar. Cassidy's handwriting. The same loops and curves that used to write grocery lists and birthday cards, and apparently text messages about how easy I was to manipulate. There was a note taped to the top. Jaden, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I found these things while packing up my stuff. I thought you might want them. If you want to throw them out, I understand. I just didn't want to forget what we had, even if it wasn't real for me the way it was for you. See, even her apology was a backhanded insult. What we had wasn't real for her. But apparently, she assumed it was real for me, like I was some kind of emotional simpleton who'd been genuinely invested in our marriage while she was running a long-term con. The nerve of this woman was honestly impressive. I stared at that box for about 5 minutes, debating whether to just throw it in the dumpster without opening it. Whatever was inside, photos, letters, mementos from our relationship, it was guaranteed to be either painful or infuriating or both. Why voluntarily sign up for that kind of emotional damage? But curiosity is a hell of a drug, and after 3 months of successfully not thinking about Cassidy, I found myself genuinely wondering what she thought was worth returning. What remnants of our fake marriage did she think I'd want to keep? I was still standing there holding the box when Sierra appeared at the top of the stairs, probably wondering why I hadn't shown up for coffee. Hey, you okay? She asked, taking in my expression and the box in my hands. You look like someone just delivered you a live grenade. Something like that, I said. My ex-wife sent me a box of stuff from our marriage. I'm trying to decide whether opening it qualifies as self-harm or closure. Sierra had heard the basic outline of my divorce story over the past few months. Not the gory details about fraud and manipulation, but enough to understand that my marriage had ended badly and that my ex-wife was, in Sierra's words, a piece of work who didn't deserve you. You want some company while you decide? She asked. I can make us some coffee and provide moral support / voice of reason. You don't have to do that. It's probably going to be weird and depressing. Jaden, I've been divorced too. I know what it's like to get unexpected packages from your past. She smiled, but there was something serious in her eyes. Sometimes it helps to have someone else there to remind you that whatever's in that box, it's just stuff. It can't actually hurt you unless you let it. So that's how I ended up sitting on my couch with Sierra, drinking maple bourbon lattes at 10 in the morning while preparing to excavate the remains of my failed marriage. If someone had told me 6 months ago that this would be my life, I probably would have checked them into a mental health facility. I opened the box slowly, like it might contain something explosive, which, emotionally speaking, it probably did. The first thing I saw was photos. Lots of them. Wedding pictures, vacation shots, random candid moments from 3 years of documented lies. There we were at the beach in Mexico, looking happy and in love. There we were at my nephew's birthday party, playing the part of the perfect couple. There we were on our first anniversary, exchanging gifts and acting like we had a future together. Looking at these photos now was like watching a movie where you know the twist ending. Every smile looked fake. Every tender moment felt calculated. Every expression of love seemed like an Academy Award-worthy performance in the category of Best Actress in a long-term deception. "Wow," Sierra said, looking over my shoulder at a photo of Cassidy and me at some work party. "She's beautiful." "Yeah, she is. Too bad her personality is uglier than a mud fence." Sierra laughed. "That's the spirit. What else is in there?" "Letters. Cards I'd written her for birthdays and anniversaries. A ticket stub from the first movie we'd seen together. A pressed flower from some romantic dinner I'd planned. All the little mementos that people collect when they think they're building something permanent instead of being systematically dismantled by someone who thinks love is a business transaction. At the bottom of the box was a letter addressed to me. Not a note like the one taped to the outside, but an actual letter, multiple pages, sealed in an envelope. "You don't have to read that," Sierra said quietly. "Not today. Not ever if you don't want to." "No, I think I do." I opened the envelope and scanned the first few lines. It was exactly what you'd expect. A long, rambling explanation of how sorry she was, how she'd made mistakes, how she hoped I could forgive her someday. The same self-serving nonsense she'd been texting me for weeks after I served her the papers. But here's the thing about closure. It's not about forgiveness or understanding or even moving on. It's about finally seeing something clearly for what it really is. And what I saw, looking at that box of memories and reading that letter, was the complete and total absence of anything worth keeping. These weren't mementos of a real relationship. They were props from an elaborate performance that I'd been too trusting to recognize as fiction. The photos showed moments that had felt real to me, but were just acting exercises for her. The letters I'd written were genuine expressions of love sent to someone who was calculating their monetary value. "You know what's funny?" I said to Sierra, closing the letter without finishing it. "I thought this would hurt more." "What do you mean?" I thought seeing all this stuff would make me sad or angry or nostalgic or something. But it doesn't. It just looks like evidence from someone else's life." I picked up one photo, a selfie we'd taken on Christmas morning, both of us smiling at the camera like we were the happiest couple in the world, and really looked at it for the first time since everything fell apart. "I'm keeping this one," I said. "Really? Why?" "Because I need to remember what a lie looks like when it's smiling at you. I need to remember that people can fake anything if the payoff is big enough." I put the photo aside and started putting everything else back in the box. "The rest of this can go in the trash." "Are you sure?" "Sierra, you can't rebuild your life while you're still carrying around the wreckage of your old one. I spent 3 years building something with someone who was never really there. I'm not going to spend the next 3 years mourning something that was never real." I closed the box and set it by the door. Later, I'd take it down to the dumpster where it belonged. But right now, I had something more important to do. "Wait here," I told Sierra, and went to my workshop. I came back with a small wooden box I'd been working on for the past month. It was made from reclaimed barn wood, with dovetail joints and a brass latch, the kind of craftsmanship that takes time and patience and genuine care. "What's this?" Sierra asked. "This is for the things that actually matter," I said, opening the box to show her what was inside. The lease to this apartment. The business cards from my new clients. A photo of me and Tyson from last weekend. The receipt from our first real date last week. Sierra smiled, understanding immediately. "You're starting a new collection. I'm starting a new life. And this time, I'm only keeping the real stuff." I handed her the box. "This is yours if you want it. For all the moments we're going to build together. The real ones." She took the box and held it like it was made of something precious. Which, I guess it was. It was made of hope and trust, and the kind of faith that's only possible after you've learned the difference between what's real and what's performance. This time, I said, we build something that lasts. And looking at Sierra, holding that box and smiling at me like I was someone worth building a future with, I finally believed it was possible.